Welcome back for more Bhagavatam. Let me know if the volume is too low or whatever. I think it should be okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the turtle god, which is super interesting. Of course, turtle god must be interesting. So we're looking at text 29 through 33 of chapter 18 of Canto 5 of Bhagavata Purana. 29. Hiranmayepi Bhagavan Nivasati Kunmatanum Vibhranas Tasyatat Priyatamam Tanum Aryama Sahavarsha Purusha Pitri Ganadipatir Upadhavati Mantramimam Chanujapati. Hey, dog. In Hiranmaya. Where's Hiranmaya? It's in the north. It's the, what did we call it? Yeah, temperate? The temperate? So it's in between the Arctic and the tropic. What do you call that area? The latitudes that are lower than Arctic but higher than tropic. I guess we call them temperate. It's that area of the northern hemisphere. Of Boo. So he's not talking about Boo, the localized human Boo that we have a small Earth here. He's talking about the big cosmic Boo, which stretches from our Earth to our moon. So it's a different way of perceiving the Earth. And in the section of that Boo, in the northern temperate region of that Boo, the form of Bhagavan, who is a turtle, Kurma, resides, Nivasati, and wanders around, Viprana. So I have two turtles, and they indeed like to wander around. It's difficult to keep track of where they are. And now I'm waiting for spring, really, because turtles kind of do a semi-hibernation thing in the winter. So I'm not really sure exactly where they are at the moment, because we brought them to the new property and put them in a pond. But that's going to be an interesting part. Of what Arima says to Kurma. Actually, it's an interesting thing about the turtle god, is it is difficult to know where he is. So in Hiranmaya, Bhagavan resides and wanders in the form of a turtle. Aryama. Now, which Aryama is this? This is the Aryama, the famous Palguni Aryama. How do I know that it's that Aryama? Because it's Pitri Gana Dipati, the Lord of the hosts of ancestors, the Lord of the hosts of Pitris. That Aryama is Upadhavati, chasing or running towards that Priyatama Tanu, that very beloved form of the turtle. So it's interesting that he's running towards, he's described as running towards, chasing after, looking for. And it's also implied that it is through this mantra that his mind is running towards him. Upadavati mantram imam chanujapati. This is the first time that the word japati is used for the mantra and not udharana, chodharana or something like that. So something about kurma and aryama, the worship is expressed more quietly. Japa is quiet or inaudible. This may also have to do with the turtles being hidden and things being hidden. And so here's the whole translation. In Hiranmaya, Bhagavan resides and wanders in the form of a turtle, Aryama. Aryama, the lord of the host of ancestors, runs towards that beloved turtle with the citizens of this realm while chanting this mantra. So you may have heard of this turtle before. This is actually the world's most famous turtle. If you travel through the airports in south of Asia, you sometimes see sculptures of this turtle. And, there's elaborations on this idea of who this turtle is. So let's go ahead and see what mantra is used to worship the turtle. Om Namo Bhagavate Akuparaya. Sarva Sattva Guna Visheshana. Sarva Sattva Guna Visheshana. Anupalakshita Sthanaya. Namo Varshmane, Namo Bhumne, Namo Vasthanaya, Namaste. Adorations to the boundless Bhagavan turtle. So I was joking with my friends the other day. I really like this term. I like that phrase, Namaste. Om Namo Bhagavate Akuparaya. Adorations to the boundless Bhagavan turtle. So Akupa means boundless or infinite, but it refers to turtles because the word meaning boundless, it's simultaneously boundless and bounded, depending on how you pronounce the first A. So turtles are bounded by their shell on the outside of their body, so they're called Akupa. So the word being used, the way it's being used here, it means the boundless turtle, the boundless bound, which is very important for understanding philosophy, Vedic philosophy. Our concept of infinity is not imperceptible. Generally, if you think of something that's infinite, you think of something you can't see. Or at least you can't see all of it or something. But our concept of infinitude is that it exists within and harmonious with finitude. Just like you can easily count from 1 to 2, even though there's infinite amount of numbers in between 1 and 2. Adoration to the boundless Bhagavan turtle, whose attributes are pure existence. Sarva Sattva. So Sarva Sattva means the whole thing is Sattva. It's another way of saying Shuddha Sattva. Reality is Sat. Real things are called Sattva. So in this world we have a guna or a quality called Sattva Guna. It means the realness of things. By Sattva Guna you get to know what a thing really is. You get to experience the thing. So Sattva Guna enables perception. But in our reality, we're always bringing new perceptions into being and then taking old perceptions out of being. So our Sattva is not Sarva Sattva. It's Mishra Sattva. It's Sattva that's mixed with Rajas to take things into perception and Tamas that bring things out of perception. But Bhagavan's form and Bhagavan's reality is just Sattva. So all of his guna, he's not near guna. He's near guna in the sense of not having trigunas, not having sattva, rajas, and tamas. But he has sarva sattva guna. Bhagavan has qualities which can be perceived, but they're not limited. So it's just like the infinitude being compatible with the finite, not incompatible with the finite. We tend to think if something is infinite, then you can't number it. But it's incorrect. You can number it. But you can't number all of it. And that's exactly what Aryamana is going to be talking about in this section. Although you can't number all of it, you can number the parts of it that are accessible to perception. And so you can perceive it and interact with it without making it finite. It doesn't mean that Bhagavan is finite or limited if you can see, smell, taste, hear, etc. Name Bhagavan. Fully knowable. Just like you can count from 1 to 2, but you cannot ever really stop counting from between 1 and 2. So you can say, I counted from 1 to 2, but then you can also say, no, it's impossible to count everything from 1 to 2. Hope it's making sense. Then he says, now when you go and when you hear about kurma or a kupa, you hear about a turtle upon whom Mandara mountain is resting. It's Mandara mountain is affixed by Indra, tied by some mechanics to the shell of this turtle. And Mandara is an extremely important cosmic phenomenon because Mandara is the northern solstice. So so kurma, the effect of kurma in our space-time is part of the orbit of this, or of the Earth, really. Part of the Earth's orbit. So it's something like Sankarshan, and it has to do with gravity. So it's really, because of this turtle, the various elements line up on each other. That's why when you go through, I don't know, Malaysian airport or something, you see these turtles stacked up on each other. And the turtles, they really do. Real turtles, they stack up on each other. It's this idea of kurma is at the bottom and reality is stacked up on him. And he reaches up to a point. That point is the Mandara, the peak of Mandara, which is the northern solstice, Namo Varshamane. Varshamane means the vertex. Vertex or the apex. So here he says 3 namas. He's Namo Varshmana, Namo Bhumna, and Namo Avasthana. It's just like when we say Bhurbhuvaswa. We talk about the sky and the space and the earth. That's the summary of the world that we know. The accessible, the visible world to us. Those are the 3 worlds. So that's what he's saying here. Varshamana is like space at the apex of what kurma is holding in place. Bhumne is like bhuva. It's like the ground or the space in between. So you could take bhu as being bhu, meaning the ground, or you could take it as bhuva, meaning the sky area. And then avasthana is the place that you rest. You could take that as the ground, or you could take it as the foundation of the earth, the underground. Probably best to take avasthana as the foundation of the earth because the turtle is under ground, actually. This is another thing of if you actually have the fortune of having real turtles and a real pond. So I put my turtles in a pond. And what did they do? They disappeared. It's very difficult. It's anupalakshita sthanaya. It's difficult to find them. They disappeared, and how did they disappear? They disappear by going under the mud into the avasthana. So this is the idea of Kurma avatar. It's the form of Bhagavan that's under the mud, not visible, but holding everything else up on top of it. So adoration to the vertex, adoration to the ground, adoration to the foundation, adoration to you. Meaning you are the vertex, the ground, and the foundation. Okay? Om Namo Bhagavate Akuparaya Sarvasattva Guna Visheshana Anupalakshita Sthanaya Namo Varshmane Namo Bhumne Namo Namo Vasthanaya Namaste. And the next. Now, these are the texts where the speaker starts to explain their thoughts. The thoughts behind the mantra. Not noticing any questions. Yad rupam etam nijamayarpitam atasvarupam bahurupa rupitam sankhya na yasyastyathal sankhya na yasyasthyatha palam bhanat. That's a hard one. Sankhya na yasyatyatha yayata. That's what it is. Sankhya na yasyatyayato palam bhanat. Tasmai namaste vyapadesha rupine. This form of yours is derived by your own potency. Yad rupam etan Yad rupam nijam mayayarpitam. So that's an interesting thing about Bhagavan, which makes the form of Bhagavan different than the forms that we experience. So the way that we experience form is that there's an animator of a form, which is not identical to the form itself. So for example, Grandpa is alive, and then Grandpa is dead. But Grandpa left behind a body that was alive yesterday. But it's not Grandpa anymore. Where did Grandpa go? But while Grandpa was here, Grandpa was that body. I mean, that's the only way that you access Grandpa. But now all of a sudden the body thing is still there, but Grandpa's not. So that's how we experience form, is that the animator of the form isn't entirely the same as the form. And the reason for that is that the form is supplied by someone else, by something else. So in our existence, animators are given form by an agency called Prakriti, which doesn't belong to them, which doesn't belong to us. So we are bestowed forms by nature, by the world, by mom and dad. You get a form, but then you leave that form behind also at some point. The difference with Bhagavan's form is Bhagavan is by Nija Maya. So we get our form by Maya, by some energy. And so does Bhagavan. Bhagavan gets forms by Maya, by some energy. But the Maya is Bhagavan's Maya. Not somebody else's Maya. It's not somebody else's power. So it's not a soul animating a body. It's a body which is a soul. It's a body which is a display or a perceptual, countable, numerable, definite, finite version of an infinite, innumerable thing. Do you understand? Yad rupame tan nija maya arpitam. Maya is arpita. providing this form. Nidya Maya, your own Maya. The Maya which is fully identical to you and fully in your control, not in anybody else's control. You understand the difference? Think about the differences that are involved in that. For example, it's like the difference between owning a house or renting a house. If you rent a house, you can't just decide to put a door in the wall somewhere. You can't decide to like add an expansion or something. Because the house is provided to you by somebody else and you're not really identical with the house. But when you own a house, it's Nija Maya Arpita. It's offered to you by your own potencies. So think about the differences there. The house is fully under your control. And you can live in it as long as you like. Bill says, no, I had not heard the story of a Chinese emperor finding Saturn's magic square on the back of a turtle. Atman Brahman says, how do we select the form of God to worship? I don't understand. People get hung up on this. It's because you have too much Rajaguna. All you see is differences between things. Why would you select? What is Bhagavan like jewelry at a jewelry store and you can pick the one that you like? What is the need to select when everything is the same? I don't understand. You don't select. You don't select. Just proceed. When you go to a restaurant, how do you select something from the menu? Because your inclinations bring you to that conclusion. You don't ask, how will I arrive at the conclusion of what I'm going to order? You just come to the conclusion of what you're going to order by going about the process of eating. So just go about the process of worship. If you're unclear of which one, then anyone is fine. Daniela says the soul is the body. In the case of Bhagavan. In the case of Bhagavan or any being who is manifesting a body by their own potency. Okay? This form of yours is derived by your own potency. It is a real, meaningful self-manifestation. Artha Swarupam. Everywhere. So that's cool, right? Yad Rupam etan nijamaya arpitam Artha Swarupam. It's a meaningful Artha Swarup self-manifestation. It's a real self-manifestation. Bahu Rupa Rupitam. Everywhere we see Etan Bahu Rupa Rupitam. Everywhere we see many forms of forms. It's interesting that he says Rupa Rupitam. It's like he's kind of bringing up like images of fractals, of infinite forms. Forms that have forms, subforms within them, and within them are other subforms and forms. There's so much form is what Arima is talking about now. Think about the space between the number 1 and 2. 1 is a form, 2 is a form, and in between 1 and 2 there's so many other forms. 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And in between 1.0 and 1.1 is 1.01, 1.02, 1.03. This Rupa Rupitam. Everywhere we see many forms of forms, and they're infinite and uncountable. Sankhya Nayasya. You can't Sankhya. You can't count them. Because ayata upalambana. Because at some point our eyes become blurry. Like when you look at a ruler, you can see 1 centimeter, boom, 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 boom. But if you don't have your glasses on, you might not be able to see 5 lines, 4 lines in between each little big line in between each centimeter. Maybe you can just see the one big line and it'll blur. But if you have excellent eyes, maybe you can see the dots in the wood, the grain in the wood between each one of those lines. But you can't see the atoms in between each dot in the grain of the wood, but they're there. So what he's saying is because of yata upalambana, because of blurriness in the perception, we're not able to see all of the infinitude that's within the finitude. We're not able to see all the rupa within the rupa. Which has very important implications for space-time. This is a whole new perhaps this is a whole new concept of space-time, is that you don't need a very big space to get infinite space. You don't need a very long time to get infinite time. In fact, bigness and length is not meaningful except in how you're talking about relationships between things. But there's no absolute sense of bigness or length. There's no absolute sense of size or duration. There's only relative. It's not that there's no meaning to size or duration, but it's relative. This form of yours is derived by your own potency. It is a real, meaningful self-manifestation. Everywhere, we see many forms of forms, infinite and uncountable, because we lack the capacity to recognize them fully. Tasmai namaste vyapadesha rubine. Adorations to you of indescribable form. Of vyapadesha. Upadesha means the ability to describe something. Desha means to kind of describe something. Like desh means a country. What's a country? A country is a described area. It has a border. So desha means to give something a border, or to give something a shape, to give something a rupa. Apadesh means to supply it. Anupadesh, anapadesh means you can't describe it, but you can't not describe it either. It's the essence of everything that is, but it can't be fully perceived. But all the perceptions are perceptions of it. Just like you cannot get to 2 without passing over the infinitude between 1 and 2. Yet if you tried to sit there and enumerate the infinitude between 1 and 2, you would never get to 2. Yet you can easily get to 2. Some more questions. Susan says, seems like the one with its own maya for a form would be completely integrated. Yes. Eddie says, this reminds me of Durapada Sutra. I can't remember the sutra right now. Bardo says, one can get a glimpse of who their Ishtadeva by studying the D9. Bardo, don't speak blasphemy on my channel. Bardo the Great. Look, if you want to Ishtadeva, it's as simple. It's just like if you're shopping, you want to find the best store. That's what your concept of Deva is anyway. Like I said, what do you think Bhagavan is? A bunch of jewelry and you want to pick one? Underwear and you want to find the best lingerie store? If that's what you're approaching God for, then you need karma, karka, amsa, and d9 and all that. You need your navamsha, you need your nakshatra to tell you who your deva is. That's not what Bhagavatam is talking about. That's kaitava dharma. That's cheating. That's malicious or selfish love and worship. Bhagavatam says kaitava dharma projita. We vomited and cast out that cheating adoration. And we won't deal with that at all. So then if you're asking in the sense of not cheating, of who should I love, then just stop for a second and think, what are you talking about? Who should you love? Love is not a mechanical thing. Furthermore, what are you thinking of? The object, your concept of the object is also wrong. There's not a whole bunch of different options. There's one option. Next text. Jara yujam svedajam andajab bidam charajram devarshi pitra bhutam aindriyam Dhyau kamkshti shailila sarit samudra dvipa grahaksheti abhideya eka. Thank you, Aryama. We name things differently. Abhideya. We ascribe differences to things. For example, and then he gives a lot of examples. For example, we say some things are mammals, some things are bacterial, some things are reptilian, and some things are fauna or flora. Yeah. Those are the first four things he says. Jarayujam, it's born from the placenta. It's born from the womb. Shvedajam. Sveda means it's really by the cellular division. Something becoming two things like that. Sveda. Something coming out of something else. Jarayujam, Shvedajam. Something coming out like this. Something coming out of an egg. Or Udbijam, something coming out like this, straight up, like a tree. So we name these things as if they're different. Or we say chara, achara. There are things which are mobile and there are things which are immobile. So you may categorize that as flora and fauna. Or you may categorize that as animate and inanimate, or living and non-living. Or you may say, there's devas, there's rishis, and there's pitris. There's humans, regular humans, there's superhumans, and there's gods. But that's just names. And you may, not even just among living things, but we name all kinds of inanimate things differently. We have bhutam aindriyam, the things that can be perceived by the senses. So he gives examples of those things. Dhyau kang shiti. We say that there's a sky and there's space and there's earth. That's the construct that we use to cognize those things. That's the metaphor that we derive to interact with the world. But it's not that space is from a different universe than the sky, and the earth is from a different universe than either of the other two. They're all the same thing. Shaila Sarit Samudra Dvipa. He says we think that there's a mountain, and then there's a river, and then it goes into the ocean, and then there's an island. We name them differently, we see them differently, they act differently, but they're one thing. Graha and Arksha, we think that there's planets and stars. But planets and stars are one thing, Jyotish. They're just lights. They're lights in the sky. So we name things differently. We think there's a difference between 1 and 2. There's not a difference between 1 and 2. It's one underlying thing that's showing itself in a different facet. We name things differently. Some born from womb, some born from division, some born from eggs, some from sprouting, some mobile, some not, some gods, some sages, some forefathers. We see different objects of perception too, the sky, space and earth, the hills, rivers, oceans and islands, the stars and the planets, but all are one. Eka. So you're saying, how do you know what form of Bhagavan to worship? Because you're stuck on all these differences. Where should I go? To the hill, to the river, to the ocean, or to the island? Just pick one. They're all great. Just go. They're all nature. They're all one thing. Unless you're so materialistic that you want a particular fish that can only be found in the river, then you have to go to the river. The last text. Yasmin asankheya visheshanama rupakrta kavibi kalpiteyam sankhyaya tattva drshapaniyate tasmai namas sankhya nidarshanayate. Iti. There are infinite, distinct, nameable forms and functions in you, which experts theorize about and try to enumerate, hoping to extract a vision of the true reality. Adorations to you who represents yourself in enumerations. Very good, cool content. Yasmin, in you, in this reality. Asankhyeya means uncountable, infinite. Vishesha, different. In you, there's infinite distinctions. There's degree number 1, there's degree number 2. And in between degree number 1 and 2, there's 1 degree 30 minutes. And in between 1 degree 30 minutes and 1 degree 31 minutes, there's 1 degree 30 minutes, 30 seconds. It keeps going, depending on how much blurriness you have in your eyes. How far down can you count? No matter how far down you can count, you can keep going. That's what infinitude means. It doesn't mean it's too big to see. It means you can't see to the bottom of it. Yasmin asankhyeya vishesha. And then each vishesha, each different thing within reality can be given a name and can be given a definition or a rupa. Yasmin asankhyeya vishesha nama rupa krito kavibi. That's what the kavis do. The scientists, the experts, the learned, that's what they do. They learn all the details of something. And then when they learn it, they go deeper into each detail and they learn more of the details. But do they ever stop learning? Why not? Because reality itself doesn't have a bottom. They may reach a point where they run out of access to new information. But that's not because they hit the bottom of reality. It's because their blurriness took over. The blurriness of their vision. Sankhyayeya, What's the point of doing all this Sankhya or this numeration of something which is asankhya? There's a point to it. The point is tattva drishya paniyate. Pani means to drink. Apani means to actually drink it. Drishya means to drink what? To drink a vision, or to drink the cognition or the perception. To drink the vision of what? Tattva, the realness of something. So what's the point of trying to define an undefinable thing? To understand it, that's the point. But how can you define it if it's undefinable? Undefinable doesn't mean it can't be defined at all. It means it can't be defined fully. And understanding something doesn't mean that you understand everything about it. It means you understand enough about it to interact with it, to be able to understand more. So this has, no matter what you're interested in, this is very relevant. If you're interested in the difference between Dvaita and Advaita philosophy, this is very important. If you're interested in just how you could be good to somebody or how you can love somebody, this is it. You can never understand other people. But that doesn't mean you should become a hermit. The effort to understand or to count and figure out somebody, the effort itself gives you the ability to comprehend the person. The comprehension is never a finished matter. That's why it's good. If something is finished, then it dies. The infinitude of reality is good. Otherwise, it would have been finished. There are infinite, distinct, nameable forms and functions in you which experts theorize about and try to enumerate, hoping to extract a vision of the true reality. And then this last thing. Tasmai nama sankhya nidarshanaya. So, Bhagavan is asankhya, but sankhya nidarshana. Reality or Bhagavan is an infinite thing that's boundless, but reveals itself in finite ways. The so-called Advaitist is a Dvaitist. The so-called non-dualist is a dualist if they think that there's some difference between the numerable or finite or perceptible ways that Brahman reveals itself and the Brahman itself. That's the catch. Tasnimu says, I fell in love with Shiva after listening to your Bhagavatam stream. Very nice. Eddie says, question, does the self, like matter, have a foundational cause being Bhagavan? If so, where's the line between self and the Paramatma? Yes, the foundation of the self is Paramatma, which is Bhagavan. And where's the line between the self and the Paramatma? I don't really know what that means. Where's the line? Well, what makes the Atma different from the Paramatma is simply the perception of relationship between the two. That's all. Identity is simply perception of one's relationship to something else. Atma means identity. So Paramatma just means the supreme reference point for identity. So the Paramatma is the supreme reference of identity, and the Atma is some specific identity in reference to it. The Bhagavan is the fact that Paramatma also is an Atma and uses the other Atmas as reference to its identity. And so Bhagavan has its own self. Paramatma is the supplier of selfhood reference point to everybody else. That's the difference between the two. So the difference between Atma and Paramatma is inconsequential, except that all the Atmas are dependent upon the Paramatma, because the Paramatma is the primary reference. Do you understand? You can't. Nothing exists except in terms of its difference from something else. You can't say that something exists except by defining where its boundaries are from something else, right? That's exactly what you're trying to ask. What's the defining boundary between the Atma and the Paramatma? So that's the boundary, is that the central reference point to which everything else defines its own reference point is Paramatma. So there's a difference between centrality. The line or the difference between the Atma and Paramatma is one of centrality. The Paramatma is the central self, and the Atma is the peripheral self. Hopefully that does make sense. Any other questions? Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you in a couple of days again.